Revolutionary women have fundamentally changed the world. 100 years ago, many thousands of young Irish women joined in radical organisations to fight for what the revolutionary Countess Markievicz called the three great causes: the cause of women, the cause of labour, and the fight for Irish freedom. When our histories are written, sometimes those women make it into the margins, sometimes only into the footnotes. And Helena Maloney, one of those great women who fought for Irish freedom, had a response to that. She said that men find it hard to believe that women can embrace an ideal, accept it intellectually, feel it with a great emotion, and calmly work towards its realization. I wonder why. Many of these women did that. Helena herself worked all of her life for women's rights, workers' rights, and the cause of Irish freedom. She is an exemplar of a revolutionary woman. But the cost of fighting for women's rights and for Ireland did not come without a very high price. Many of these young women joined an organisation called Cumann, the Irish Women's Council in English. Cumann was the militant Republican women's organisation. The men wouldn't let them join their organisation, so they had to set up their own one. I want to tell you a few stories about those women in Cumann. In a small town in Lixnaw, not 15 miles from here, a young brother joined with the Republican men, and his sister Bridget O'Grady, joined Cumann. On an October night in 1920, a lorry load of military men roared into Lixnaw village looking for Stephen O'Grady. They were masked and armed, and many of them were drunk. They arrived to the Grady house, pulled up, leapt out, and started banging on the door with their rifle butts. Can you imagine the terror and the clatter inside in the house? Stephen got out the back, fled out to the fields, but they burst their way into the bedroom where they found Bridget O'Grady. They knew she was a member of Cumann, so they dragged her out of her bed, out of the house, still clad in her nightdress, and put her kneeling in the middle of a cold, wet October night in a water channel, and got out some cutting implement, possibly a sheep's shears, from their lorry, and cut off her hair. They forcibly hair cropped her. Can you imagine the scene with the blood as they nicked some of her scalp coming down her face, wet from the rain and sweat, terror sweat? This young woman paid a high price for being a member of Cumann, as many women did. There were over 20,000 raids on Irish homes during 1920. Mostly the men escaped because they were on the run. What they found in those homes were older and younger women, and they committed acts of brutality, physical, psychological, emotional, and sexual. What we now call today gender-based violence on those young women. Many decades later, Bridget applied for a military pension. She wrote, the military came raiding on our house many times, and the Black and Tans cut off my hair. Very prosaically. She just put it down there on paper. Bridget was denied a military pension. Her sacrifice and her activism was not recognised by the state she had fought to bring into being. Another story, also based in North Kerry, is of a young woman, barely out of her teens, who took a train to Dublin to go to the convention in 1921 of Cumann. They had to move several times because the police were following them, but eventually she was in a room where she heard her president, Countess Markievicz, say that the men have said they could not take the fight to the British without the work of the women. As I was scrolling through the records of this convention in the National Library, I happened to read that name, Johanna McAuliffe, Secretary, Dua Cumann, my grandmother. She did apply for a pension. Johanna did apply for a pension, and she did get one, but it was grade D. All of the women got grade D, the lowest grade you could get, and she was given a medal for her activism in the fight for Irish freedom. But many of these women went unrecognised by their state and indeed by their societies, because many of them kept their stories secret. It's only now we're beginning to see them. But it is on the backs of these foremothers and on their shoulders that we built the activism that has given women freedom in Ireland today. In the 1970s, a second generation of Irish feminists came into being. Some of you may remember the 1970s. Women had no equal right to the workplace, equal access to education, no access to contraceptives, no full reproductive rights. Many girls were incarcerated in Magdalen laundries and mother and baby homes. A woman could not apply for a mortgage without a male guarantor. These women did not want to accept that situation, and inspired by the rising wave of feminism and civil rights campaigns throughout the world, they came together and formed the Irish Women's Liberation Movement. And they produced their manifesto, Chains or Change. And they called it that deliberately, because without change, they would not lose the chains that bound them. And in that manifesto, they demanded equal opportunity, equal access to the workplace, the equal rate of pay as a man for the same work. They wanted justice for deserted wives, for unmarried mothers, and for widows. I bet you didn't know that a widow didn't automatically inherit her house then. Her husband had to make sure he mentioned her in the will, and if he didn't, well, she had no rights to that family home. And they fought many long, hard decades for those rights, rights we now take for granted. There were many obstacles along the way and moments of trauma. One of those moments of trauma happened here in Kerry, in Tralee, in January 1985, when the Lynch Tribunal convened to decide what they would do about the behaviour of Gardaí in the investigation into the discovery of 2 bodies of babies in Cahersiveen and in Abbeydourney in the previous year. A young woman was accused of murdering them both. That woman to blame was put in the dock for 3 days, and it became more an inquiry, an inquisition into her behaviour than the behaviour of the police. Poet and Professor Brendan Kennelly called it a medieval witch hunt. Feminist and journalist Nell McCafferty, who was at the tribunal day in, day out, with many women outside the tribunal protesting at the treatment of that young woman, Joanna Hayes, said, "This was the anvil on which the new Ireland was hammered." And that new Ireland took a long time to come into being. But it has arrived. We do have equal rights and equal opportunities. We do have equal pay, more or less. There is a gender pay gap, but you could say women have it all these days. But do they? Do we still need revolutionary women? I think the answer to that question is yes, we do. We still need them today. In our globalized online world, you can see the misogyny in full flow. You can see the doxing and trolling. You can see the hate from the manosphere. You can see the rowback in the rights for women in many countries throughout the world, driven by social media and by technology. You can see what is happening. You can see the models that are being put in place for young women. Trad wives, who doesn't follow an influencer who's a trad wife, saying that women need to go back into the domestic. So what do we do about this backlash? The term coined by the American feminist Susan Faludi in 1991, the backlash to the rights of women. You could say the backlash is about stopping women in their tracks and ensuring that they don't get any more rights, or by rowing back on all the rights they have already achieved. Either way, it's about stopping women. And what would our revolutionary foremothers have done if they had faced a backlash? Well, actually, they did. The War of Independence was ended by the Anglo-Irish Treaty in December 1921, and in February 1922, Cumann met to decide it. They rejected it in large part because it did not deliver what they wanted, a 32-county republic of equals. And in the ensuing civil war, they were on the wrong side. Their male comrades, who were now the masters of the new Irish Free State, considered them to be furies, to be extremists, to be harpies, to be women to be contained and confined, and they imprisoned them in large numbers in barracks and jails throughout the country. In fact, they opened up a space in Tralee jail here for the local women who were anti-treaty, and then shipped them off by cattle boat to Dublin to imprison them in Kilmainham jail. Many of these young women spent over a year in jail. When they came back, when the Civil War was over, They were told to be quiet, to be silent, to not talk about what they did. And many of them were, but a lot of them still campaigned for the rights of Irish women. When legislation proved that women were second-class citizens by throwing them off juries, by not allowing them to work in certain areas, by introducing the marriage bar so that if you had a job in the civil service and got married, you lost your job, and in the 1937 Constitution by making the model of the domestic, marital, reproductive woman the only acceptable one in the Irish state and indeed the Irish Republic. Mothers buy their life in the home, should not by economic necessity be forced to work outside the home to the neglect of their duties in the home. Where does it say in the Constitution what men's duties are? And certainly not in the home. The women in 1937 called it, as Hannah Sheehy Skeffington, a famous suffragette and feminist, said, a fascist model. We had an opportunity to repeal it last year. Unfortunately, that did not happen, and it is still in our Constitution. So I would argue there is still need for radical, revolutionary women. There is still need to carry that fight to the patriarchal state. The voices of women are often shut down. Feminist voices, queer voices, trans women's voices, the voices of migrant women, of women of colour. These are the ones most targeted online and indeed in real life. So today I say to you, sisters, comrades, allies, the revolutionary movement still needs us. Radicalism still needs us. Feminism still needs us. The fight continues. Thank you.